will very shortly be talking to, because we couldn't get Tory, we've got Tony, who looks very similar, I have to say. Gosh, the similarity between... It's freaky. The you'll see, Tony, when we do this, and you just look at him and you could be looking at Tory whānau, couldn't you, Josh? Hey, you could be looking. What is it? What is it about Wellington? Does everybody look the same in Wellington, Tony? Lovely to have you on the show. Councillor Tony Randle, who is a Wellington City Councillor. He will be joining us on a relatively regular basis from now. We have invited Tory whānau onto the platform, Tony, on a regular basis. But she's a Green candidate and a Green mayor. And the Green Party, for reasons that are beyond me, have boycotted the platform. Yeah,
it's a bit odd because, you know, the Green Party is a party of diversity, of a wide catchment.
Good point, yes.
Yes. And it's a bit disappointing that there's a sort of a limit to that, you know, that they talk a lot about it being, you know, being in touch with everybody. But, you know, I think the reality we're seeing, you look at what they do as far as compared to what they say, and it ain't quite so true.
No, I just got a lecture, for example, just recently from a Green councillor about integrity. And I went, and there was no self-awareness at all when they made that lecture, Tony. So I guess you're going through the same sort of thing, are you?
Yes, that's absolutely true. And even today there was a question raised about the genuineness and the fact that, you know, that me as a councillor, you know, it just opposes stuff, you know, the right stuff. And, you know, it's just simply not true. I mean, we live in a democracy, for God's sake. I mean, it's designed to have different views. And it seems some people struggle with that more than others.
Just before we carry on about Wellington, though, and just carrying that thought a bit further, do you see in Greens kind of people that you might have seen on the academic campus back in Otago when you were an undergraduate? the group that we used to know them as the weasels, the sort of socialist types, you know, who always had a belief that there was only one way to look at the world and any other belief was wrong, and that you just immediately blank those people who had a different view than you.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's sort of interesting because, you know, back then it was sort of the same message, but it was a different icon. The icon back then was quite clearly Karl Marx.
Yes, that's right.
You know, New Zealand's direction was state ownership. I mean, there were genuine students, and there were genuine students. I remember Michael being one of them, another Michael, not you, obviously, you know, who was absolutely an avowed communist. And one of the interesting things is now today he's a academic in a major university.
Oh, why doesn't that surprise me? Just quietly.
Yes.
Hey?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Well,
where did they all go?
That's where they went.
Yeah.
And another generation.
Into academia. Why? But we've talked about this before. I mean, Wellington elected Tory whānau.
Yep.
Why? I mean, and then as we know, we've also talked about this before. I've thought much about this just because I've been here for the last 48 hours. The other thing is that wherever I talk to people here, they're actually quite depressed, Tony.
Oh.
You know, there is not an optimistic vibe in the city.
Yeah.
And I've been surprised. I thought it was just media talk. But in the last 48 hours, just talking to people, they're going, hang on, no, something like, we'll thrive in 25. That's the one. We'll thrive in 25.
Really?
So sort of going, we've just got to...
The golden age is coming.
It's going to, you know, and I'm going, there's going to be even less people we're going to publish. So
well,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
I mean,
why is that? Why would people go to the left, to the Greens? Have they demonstrated in the past that they are magnificent managers of resources and people?
I mean, if you're talking about the election, you know, a year and a half ago, I think that was something a bit peculiar. New Zealand, Wellington was in a funk as it was. You know, we had Andy Foster, we had terrible water woes, town hall projects, big mega things, literally sewage on the streets. And then we had Paul Eagle came along, as I thought was perhaps the leading candidate.
The Labor MP.
The ex-Labor MP.
Yeah.
And the two of them seemed to just focus on each other and bicker. And then Tory came along and said, actually, I'm going to unify this council. The problem with this council is unity, a lack of unity. And yeah, sure, she was she was independent, but she was green.
Yeah.
And I think there was a facade that people saw a lot through that. But mostly Wellingtonians just wanted to get someone who would bring the council together and get on and do the basics. And Tory, I think, rightly says she stood on cycleways, she stood on, a lot of the green policies, but she also stood on unifying the council. And she sort of seemed to focus on the former, and actually the other sort of dropped off the agenda.
In any council is going to have a sort of an unofficial opposition and an unofficial sort of thing anyway.
Yes, and the biggest disappointment for me is in previous councils, that's been recognised in sharing out, for example, and I know it seems quite minor to listeners, but it's quite important around council, sharing out the chairmanship of the key committees that drive the work programs.
Yeah.
And so under Justin Lester, there was a right-leaning chair. There were under Andy Foster, there was left-leaning chairs. But under Tory Whānau, there is nothing of that.
So she was doctrinaire from the moment she got elected.
She was doctrinaire in practice from the moment she was elected.
Why? I mean, she was, just to give a bit of a background, my understanding is she was chief of staff in one of the Green MPs or in the Green leadership.
She was the chief. I think she was chief of staff of the Green Party in Parliament.
In Parliament, yeah.
I mean, I think the reason she did it is because she perhaps didn't understand local government the same way that an ex-councillor.
So she tended to look at it from a parliamentary.
She looked at it from a parliamentary point of view. And Parliament is, I mean, you've been in both, and you could probably speak more to that, but it's much more party aligned. It's much more adversarial as well.
Yeah.
And although there is a lot of cooperation, it's very much more behind the scenes. Whereas in council, it's much more in the forefront.
Yeah.
Or it should be. But we've got this parliamentary style of governance in a way in the city. I mean, I sometimes think people should look at Wellington City and say, this is what New Zealand would be like if Labour Green Te Pane Māori got elected. It's like Wellington City, driving an agenda. And there's nothing wrong with driving an agenda if you've got the votes.
Yeah.
But the problem is you've also got to take the city with you, and that's where you're getting that negative element. I think a lot of the city feels that they've been left behind in the agenda discussion.
Going back to last week, there were a series of headlines, Tony, mostly centred on Wellington, in actual fact, to do with the loss of jobs. I think there was MB, they were going to lose 235, there was something else.
Yep.
And I can remember smiling, not because I was taking any great exhortation from those jobs being lost, but thinking, mate, if you're giving those headlines for 250 jobs, you wait until next year, because we all know that this government has an intention of winding back the state to the numbers that Labor inherited roughly 6 years ago.
Yep.
Which is 16,000 less civil servants.
Yep.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. Look, I think New Zealand as a whole, they voted for this. I think they wanted less government, less stuff. And Wellington is, that's one of the things that's a problem for Wellington, is that we're losing a fairly high number, compared to the rest of New Zealand, a large number of jobs. I did note, so I get that feedback too. I know people who have been flagged to be made redundant, or and the consequences on the support as well. That means less people going and having coffees. That means that percolates through any community when you have a big thing. But someone reminded me saying that we didn't get the same angst, at least through the media, when they shut down, for example, the oil and gas industry in New Zealand under the previous government, and I'm sure that places like New Plymouth, around Taranaki and that sort of stuff, I'm sure they lost a lot of jobs too because of a government decision. That's the nature of things. In some ways, I'd like to have a little less government because you don't have these big changes between one side and the other. Just focus on more basic stuff.
Of course, now those 16,000 won't all be confined to Wellington, but pretty serious.
Hope not.
Yeah, well, a pretty serious proportion of them obviously will be. Has your council, the Wellington City Council, taken a particular view? Because the redundancies are going to, you would think, hurt your council.
I mean, it's certainly been raised by councillors, and I know that Tory is meeting with the Prime Minister coming up, and I know that that's going to be part of the discussion. Well, I don't know it is. It's been talked about amongst the councillors and with Tory, and so in her role as mayor, of course, she wants to get good things for Wellington, and that includes maybe having some ideas about minimising the adverse impact, or maybe making it a little less dramatic over time. I don't know. That's discussion between her and the ministers that she's working with. But that is a concern for sure.